Hello and welcome to County Board Wrap-Up, our monthly in-depth look at the actions the County Board takes at its regular meetings. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and as you can see, we are coming to you in a new virtual format this month due to the need to maintain that social distancing during the COVID-19 pandemic. Joining me today from their homes as well are Arlington County Board Chair Libby Garvey and Board Member Katie Crystal. Thank you both for taking the time to be here today.
Good morning, Kara.
We're going to take a look, of course, into the decisions the board took at its April meeting, as well as the special budget adoption meeting on April 30th. But before we get started, we wanted to begin today with a tribute to Board Vice Chair Eric Gutschall, who passed away April 16th after a 2-month battle with brain cancer. Eric died at home, surrounded by his family, just days before his 50th birthday. Now, Eric was elected to the board in 2017 and quickly made his mark as a champion of sustainability, inclusion, and affordable housing. He was a frequent guest here on this show, where he brought wit and insight into our conversations about the county board actions. Now, if you'd like to learn more about Eric and his contributions to this county as a volunteer, a commissioner, or as a board member, or if you'd just like to share your thoughts and your memories of him for his family, just visit the county website at arlingtonva.us, keyword Eric Gutschall. And Libby and Katie, just wanted to get your thoughts, say a few words about what Eric's passing has meant to you and, of course, his time here on the county board.
Well, I think we're all missing Eric quite a bit. I think not everybody knows, but a lot of people do. We started off kind of a little differently because he was my opponent in an election, and I did win that one. And when he joined the board, we were kind of a little cautious with each other, but basically really became friends. And he was my vice chair, really getting the hang of being a board member. Great guy, really good dad, father, husband, everything. So we're all really missing him a lot. It's just kind of added to the whole kind of unreality about this whole pandemic situation in some ways. But and I'm really pleased that we're going to show this video because everybody, you and your team put that together, and it really is. It's a nice tribute, and I hope people will go on the page and write their thoughts, because I know it means a lot to Renee and his family. So yeah, this is just hard. It's just hard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Katie,
thanks for asking, Kara. We miss Eric profoundly. He certainly knew more than anyone else on the board combined about land use in this county, which he developed that expertise not from any formal education, but out of deep love for Arlington, love for his neighborhood, love for the service on the Planning Commission, and an abiding belief that small groups of civic neighbors could make change in this community and shape its future. We have been missing him every day. I miss his perspective on a variety of issues that come before the board, his camaraderie, the conversations we had as I joined him on the journey of being a parent. And I know that the legacy that he's left, probably most importantly, is his children and wife, who were the center of his universe, but he's also left a tremendous impact in every corner of our community. And I think the thing that I will remember most about Eric is his commitment to and interest in inclusion. He had a real interest in what the needs of the disability community were, for example, or the needs of lower income residents, what it would take to support them in really flourishing in Arlington the way he and his family had done. So it is an understatement to say that we miss him, but he has made a tremendous impact in his not quite 50 years.
Yeah, no, he had and I loved, Eric had such a great sense of humor, but he never took himself too seriously, but he took the work in the county very seriously. He was just a great guy, and we really do miss him a lot. Yeah. So I'd love to see the video. I like watching it again. It's a great video. Thanks.
All right. Well, as Libby said, here's that short in memoriam video produced by Arlington TV. Eric Gutschall will be missed. We're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how the county is operating during this era of COVID-19, and of course, how that pandemic has reshaped Arlington's fiscal year 2021 budget. Stay with us. Welcome back to County Board Wrap Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and with me today are Board Chair Libby Garvey and Board Member Katie Crystal to talk about those key actions the board took in April and what those actions mean for you and your community. Of course, the coronavirus remains at the top of everyone's mind and is the focus of much of the county's efforts and resources as we head into yet another month of stay at home in Arlington. As you can see, the board moved to all virtual meetings in April and made some other changes as well to keep government functioning in a transparent, inclusive, and accountable way, while at the same time keeping people safe and communicating the essential information on the pandemic. Libby, let's start with you. What are some of the highlights that the county's been taking? What are some of the biggest changes you've seen, and what are some of the ways I think we've been able to pivot really well?
Well, there have been a lot of changes like what we're doing here. And I think we're pivoting pretty well, considering the change. I think in many ways for us, the biggest challenge is communication with people. People are at home. This is new to all of us. We're trying, what's going on? What do we know? What's closed? What's open? What can I do? It makes it really hard. And we have a web page and put that up really quickly. And I think a lot of us noticed it was more information every day. I mean, the things are changing hourly. So while more and more information went up, it got to be kind of confusing to sort of thread through it. We were putting a lot of information up there, but then it got to be so much it was hard to actually deal with. So we just recently streamlined that page. And obviously we'll talk a bit about, what we're doing to make sure that people have enough to eat. That is a major issue for us, and try to make sure that our small businesses survive. And try to make sure that people stay as healthy as possible. It's a health emergency. It's an economic emergency. But for us, one of the major challenges is the communications, I think. And this is an effort, the way we're doing this today. We're holding town halls every Friday. 2 board members and some staff invite people to tune in. It's Facebook Live on Fridays at noon. But we also are welcoming people to let us know, how is this working for you? What can we do better? We're trying to get comment at public meetings. And so it's, I've been doing this job a long time, and this is totally new to me. Katie, what are you seeing?
Well, I think one of the things that's been challenging with the adapting is that, people all across Arlington, Virginia, and the nation are learning how to do their business online via video chat and video conferencing. It's not quite as easy for the county board or the commissions that advise us to just hop on a Zoom call, both because transparency is important to us and because it's the law. Anytime we are gathering, there needs to be an opportunity for public participation, which is to say viewing the meeting, preferably giving comments, to have it streaming, to have it captioned, and all other necessary steps to be fully transparent and inclusive. So I just want to commend our staff, particularly our clerk and our county board office staff and the ATV staff for their diligent work in trying to make sure that all of those meetings are broadcast as we try to adapt so that we can really hew to the spirit of that value of transparency and doing the public's work in public. Every time you see the 4 board members on the screen, there are about 15 more people on that call, making sure that it's available, broadcast, and accessible. So that's been one of the most interesting things in terms of adapting the work of the county board. Yeah. But I think Libby highlighted it beautifully when she talked about some of our most key needs and food access being at the very top of that priority list, along with reliable housing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. I was just going to say, I want to compliment our DTS too, Department of Technology Services. We have done some upgrades just kind of before this all hit, and so grateful that we had done that. And I will just say on the legal part, it's so fascinating to see. So we're dealing with FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and Virginia Code on meetings. Some of this code's been on the books for like 100 years or more. Certainly in the last 50, when nobody knew about technology, nobody knew about a pandemic. And so the law has been so, I don't know if you found that a bit, Katie, just kind of clunky and difficult to work with. We've got to do our work in this situation that law didn't envision. So that's been one of the challenges to manage all
That's
this.
a great point. The only thing I'd note is that they did know about a pandemic about 108 years ago.
Yes.
You're
Yes.
absolutely right. The law really didn't envision the ability for continuity of operations in a situation like this one. We're so fortunate to have the technology, but I think you're exactly right that the code hasn't necessarily kept up with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
A lot of changes.
Who could have possibly imagined we'd be in this kind of situation for especially the length of time that we've been doing it so far? I think, doesn't this start month 3 next week? I don't know. I've lost all track of time.
Yeah.
But Libby, you did mention the dashboard on the county's website, and as you mentioned, there is a wealth of information on there. If anyone who might be watching hasn't experienced that dashboard as of yet, what are some of the highlights? What is the key information that is available to our residents right at their fingertips?
Well, it's key. One of the nice things about, I think it's always been there at your fingertips, but not so much to your eyes. And now it's much more visual. So there's information if you're having issues with getting food. And that's the gamut from people who they have plenty of resources, but they need to quarantine at home, or they're vulnerable to getting this disease. They really need to stay in their homes, and delivery services are sometimes having trouble. How do you get food to yourself? Then you've got all the way to people who had jobs, were always living on the edge, and now those jobs are gone and they don't have the money to get the food. And sometimes not an internet connection. So sometimes we depend on people to know what's going on to pass on the word. But anyway, food, business assistance, same thing. And you can just look at the pictures and click on it. What's open? What's safe to do? How do I get a mask? How do I make a mask? Basically, I think pretty much anything that you want to know is there. And in fact, if anybody listening finds they go on and they can't find what they need, send us an email, countyboard@arlingtonva.us, and tell us what you're trying to find and can't find. But there's a search bar. It should all be there. And we are continuing to work really hard to keep it up to date. So, Katie, anything you want to add?
No, just that I would really lift up something you were just sharing, Libby, about the desire to reach out to people who are maybe not English speakers, or for whom the web is not a reliable point of access for them. And so really just want to highlight both that a lot of our materials have been translated into Spanish. There are also materials on really basic and core information, like steps to protect your own health and safety, where to reach out for help in languages beyond Spanish, including Arabic and Vietnamese and others. It's also a little clunky, but we do have a Google Translate function on every page within that COVID-19 website for people to translate into, I think it's 9 or 11 different languages as well. We also have, hopefully everybody watching this has received it. The team has sent a mailer to every household in Arlington in both English and Spanish with really key public health information, personal health information, tenant information for those concerned about housing, and details about food. So we're really trying to make sure that this communication strategy is comprehensive. The website is a truly extraordinary resource. I would really encourage everyone to spend a little time there. And we're also working to extend that reach.
Yep. And then while we're at it, talk about, in case somebody's watching this and doesn't have easy access, phone numbers. Old technology, it works still. So the 228 1300, so 703-228-1300. If you're having issues or know somebody having issues with housing, with getting food, that's our Department of Human Services, and that will get you help. And then if you've just got questions about COVID, you're feeling sick, you're not sure what to do, somebody else seems to be sick, what's happening, there's a 7999 number, 228-7999, and you can call that. We're actually even looking at putting signs in the medians in the roadways for people to see in Spanish and English, because sometimes the mail, there are just so many different ways of getting information out, and we're really trying to use them all. Yeah.
Well, one thing I know, obviously, that had to be altered significantly as a result of COVID-19 pandemic was, of course, the budget. Libby, you have said previously that the budget that the board adopted in April was in no way, shape, or form the budget that the manager originally presented back in February. What has changed?
Oh my, a lot.
To say the least.
Basically, we had a budget that was an increase of about 3.4%, I think, and we were going to do great. We were having new programs coming on, and all of a sudden we went from that, an increase, to a $56 million decrease. I mean, it was crazy. So, and the budget went from, I think, what was it, Katie, 410 pages down to 13, I think it was. Just
well,
trying to
it is an interesting balance, especially for our budget eagle eyes who would want to follow along. We both have a lot of the ongoing priorities laid out in the manager's original proposal, but really the document that most supersedes it is, I think, that 13 or 16 page addendum and memo that our manager presented us with. That so the budget we adopted on April 30th emphasizes that above all.
Yeah, and the important thing for people, this is going to be changing. I mean, basically, we adopted a budget where we really aren't very sure at all what our revenues are going to be, and we're really not sure at all what our expenses are going to be. Those are kind of two key areas for a budget. So clearly, as we get more information, we will be revisiting that budget quite a bit.
Yeah.
We're just adapting.
And I think commendation really goes to our Department of Management and Finance for really trying to do the best guess they could to give us a document that is as realistic as possible. Libby's exactly right. There's no way we're going to get through fiscal 20 or possibly not even start fiscal 20 in July without revisiting this. But the team did a lot of thoughtful forecasting, predicting based on what they were starting to see with areas of revenue that have taken big hits this fiscal year. Certainly things like our restaurant tax or hotel tax, as people can imagine, as well as calibrating with jurisdictions around the region to see how they were handling this estimating and forecasting. And based on the results of what we did predict, the manager was able to solve for, so to speak, that 56 million, instituting a hiring slowdown, freezing salaries, dipping into the stabilization reserve. One of the tactics he also employed was redirecting. We were going to try to increase the allocation of ongoing money, one-time money to the Affordable Housing Master Fund by 2.7 million. That was redirected to emergency housing like rent subsidies for needs for now. We know our partners at APS did also have to manage to a decrease in their budget. So I think, again, Libby's absolutely right. This is going to be much more iterative than our budgets usually are. But I also think due to that great work from our management and finance and department directors, we were able to pass a budget that's not a fiction, right? That does hew to some good projections, manages expenditures accordingly. And I think that's part of the reason I have confidence that Arlington's going to be in sound fiscal health, even if our revenues and therefore expenditures do take a significant dip in the year ahead.
Yeah, and we are lucky to have some reserves, which over the year people have criticized. But I think it's pretty clear now why it's important to have those reserves. One of the issues that's come up is people wanted us to lower the tax rate because it's different. And believe me, we know how difficult it is for people to sometimes actually be paying the real estate taxes. So among the many different sort of safety net programs that we've kind of been beefing up, in one way is our treasurer has worked to make sure there's more in our taxpayer assistance fund called TAP. And anyone who's got concerns about being able to pay taxes can contact the treasurer. People have said, why don't you postpone it? Why don't you postpone the taxes a month or so, which is what some of our neighbors have done. Well, a month in this pandemic is not going to get you very far because this is going to be going on for a long time. And the TAP program actually gives you a whole year to make payments at a very, very low rate. It's a very low cost loan. And our treasurer will really work with people and businesses as much as she can. So I encourage people, if they're having difficulty, to reach out just right away to the treasurer and let her know, and they will work with people to do that. So that is one of the many. I mean, I would say, Katie, if you agree, I mean, most of our focus now is on supporting people and getting us all through this pandemic.
That's a great point. And I think, we had a lot of conversations about the tax rate and what that meant in these current circumstances. And, it's a blunt instrument, the property tax rate. We are fortunate. There are a lot of folks in Arlington that are doing okay financially. I saw one of those websites ranked us one of the #1 places in the country to work from home. And so there are a lot of homeowners who fortunately, and we hope, will continue to come through this without a lot of impact. There are other homeowners who are facing really significant needs. And I think, as Libby was just describing with the TAP program, the goal is to get assistance to those who need it. And the property tax relief would be a pretty blunt instrument, which would leave us with fewer resources to get to those who need it. So we know that there are absolutely property owners in need. The TAP program is a great example. They are also eligible for emergency financial assistance for paying things like mortgages or other costs. And so we really want to focus on those, whether they are renters or homeowners who are experiencing financial strife right now.
Yeah, right now we have got to be strategic.
Absolutely. You have mentioned that it's very possible that the board may need to revise the 2021 budget in the coming months as we see what's going on with this pandemic. Would there be some kind of additional public process then in that kind of situation if it does need to be revised?
That's a really good question. Probably some. But probably more in the way like it gets introduced in a meeting and presented and we get some comments and then a little while later we adopt. I don't think we're going to be able to take a whole lot of time for a whole long set of processes because we just simply can't do that. But we certainly will be doing it. And as I said earlier, with communications with all this, we really welcome ideas from people. People are sending in a lot of ideas. We are all making this up as we go. None of us has been through something like this, right. And this is a smart community. And we really do welcome ideas that people have to send in on how we do just about anything. And usually Arlingtonians aren't shy. So that's actually been helpful.
Okay, well, the budget was, of course, the big news for the April board meeting, but the board did take quite a few other actions as well. We're going to talk about some of those, including a new assisted living facility for Arlington, as well as some construction now underway on the Amazon HQ2 project in Pentagon City. That's all when we come right back. Hello and welcome back to our virtual edition of County Board Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Kara O'Donnell, and I'm talking to Board Chair Libby Garvey and Board Member Katie Crystal about the actions the board took at its April meeting. Now, the board approved an assisted living facility on Lee Highway at the April meeting, but I want to talk first about the details of that project. First of all, this is the first such facility approved in Arlington in decades. Why is that, and then what changed that made it possible for the project to be approved?
Great question, Kara. So we know this is a really significant need in Arlington County as our population is aging or as folks have family members they may wish to bring closer to them. But there's been a real undersupply of this type of facility, exactly as you noted. The reason for that is for a long time, our zoning ordinance severely restricted where these assisted living facilities could be built. So back in December of last year, we voted to allow elder care and assisted living facilities to be built in mostly anywhere areas where multifamily development is already allowed. 18 different zoning districts located near or along our major planning corridor subject to site plan approval. So this is really part of our Housing Arlington work, which is designed to foster policies, pursue the land use tools that can help the county achieve the diversity of housing needed to sustain and support our diverse population. And seniors, particularly those who need elder care or memory care, are definitely part of that diverse population.
Okay, can you explain why the facility wasn't required to provide on-site affordable housing for seniors who can't afford that market rate assisted living? And then also, what community benefits will the project provide?
Great question. So this is a facility is going to provide 80 memory care units and 95 assisted living units. None of them are committed affordable, and that is because this is relatively new use, as we were talking about in Arlington, and we haven't yet developed the tools that would allow us to require affordable assisted living. Part of that is because what's really clear for a committed affordable unit in housing is not clear in assisted living. Is a unit a bed, for example? Is it a room? Is it the medical care that accompanies it? We just don't have the policies developed yet to do that. That's been a source of great frustration, I know, to the Housing Committee of our Commission on Aging, with which I liaise, and it's been a frustration, I think, to us on the board as well. The project did make a contribution to the AHIF, $356,000, give or take, and so that will be used to realize affordable units in the county, which is really important. But in the future, the next time we see one of these projects, and I hope it'll be soon, we'd like to have the tools in place that would allow us to say that we're interested in perhaps, for example, designating a certain number of beds as auxiliary beds, which is to say that's the state grant that supports low-income seniors who need assisted living care. We haven't developed the legal tools to do that yet, but our staff is very committed to doing that as part of the Affordable Housing Master Plan update. And I know they told us at the meeting they plan to work across the next calendar year to have some proposals together for our consideration.
Okay, yeah, that was actually my next.
The park. Don't forget the park.
Yeah, exactly. A public open space. It's on the southwest corner of the site, near Lee Highway. The developer is going to landscape it with a lawn, flowering tree grove, a rain garden, and the developer is going to maintain it. And in addition to being a benefit to the community as well as to the residents, I think it also is exemplary of the biophilia that's been built into this site, really based on the principle that seniors or those who may have physical health needs benefit from access to nature as much as or perhaps more than everyone. So all of the units have access to the outdoors. There are going to be green elements, both sustainability green and growing things green, designed to really make sure that the environmentalism of this project supports not only the resident, but our overall environmental health.
And I'm delighted to see it's got a lot of windows so people can, see nature, but the windows are bird safe to keep the birds from flying into them. So I come from a family of bird watchers, so I was delighted to see that. That's good.
And do you think this is going to be kind of an opening the door to future? This is the first one in decades, but do you see now that with some of the talk about revising policy that we're going to see more of these proposals come forward?
I think so. I mean, clearly there's a lot of need. That this is a whole demographic that's increasing, as I know very well, being part of that demographic. Although I think it's going to be interesting to see any changes that may come about because of the pandemic. And there may, are there going to be some changes in how these buildings are constructed or thought about? We will see. But I certainly think there's going to be a lot of need here in Arlington. So I'm glad we finally, did that work with the zoning. We're going over a lot of zoning that's been around for a long, long time. That, like the FOIA and things, we've got to get into the 21st century on a number of these things. It takes some time, but we're working our way through it.
Okay, well, now the board also approved a request by JBG Smith to use some open space that's kind of right near the site of the future Amazon HQ2 as a staging site, so to speak, for the project. Now, this was a little bit of controversy surrounding this. What was the controversy?
Well, it's such a big project. So usually you're building a building and the staging means that, like, the building materials, you got to bring the building materials here, put them down, and then put them up to build the building. And because this was such a huge building and needed a whole basement, but basically the whole thing is a big pit. So there was nowhere on the site itself to put the staging materials, is what it's called. So they needed to use the park next door. And of course, that's particularly right now, people love their parks. They want to be in the parks, but yet it's going to be offline. And we had quite a lot of back and forth about it. There was an issue of trees. I don't like taking out trees either, but it was pointed out the trees are not native species and it's probably a good idea to replace them anyway. So we had a lot of discussion, also just simply the noise on the site. And that was not exactly part of I don't think we voted on noise, but we do vote on, different ways that the timing of things that people have to use when they're doing the construction, so they can't start too early, don't go too late. But they've been doing a lot of pile driving, and that is one of the most disruptive and most difficult things you can do. So we've been working a little bit with JBG and have gotten some agreements to make that a little better, but it's been just terribly difficult for people. And then Katie, I'll invite you to talk, because it did end up being a 4-1 vote. I think the majority of us decided that the project should move forward, and that small part of the park, that we probably needed to do that. So that was why I think the 4 of us voted for it. But I know there was a lot of disagreement. I don't know, Katie, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. Thanks, Libby. So this was obviously a really tough one. I think, as Libby well indicated, this park is a pretty essential need right now for this community. It's a densely populated part of the county, and the ability to recreate or have a little natural space to breathe is critically important. Ultimately, the reason I couldn't support the use permit is that I didn't believe that the need for this offsite staging should have been a surprise to the construction contractor contractor or the development coordinator for the project. This is a large site. They intended to excavate all of it that was known at the time of the site plan last December. And I was disappointed to see that there wasn't planning at the time, and that lack of planning necessitated the use of such a critical resource at this particular moment. Nevertheless, I think it's, in order to deliver some relief for the project, it's important that relief to the surrounding neighbors who are experiencing that very loud pile driving right now. It is important that the construction be able to continue expeditiously. And so while I disagreed and was in fact frustrated with the applicant at this proposal to solve a problem that should have been foreseen, I do respect where my colleagues landed on having it move forward.
Yeah, sometimes they're different things. There are some positives in that we have just been working with Amazon, and sort of as of just yesterday afternoon, with JBG actually, who's overseeing the construction, that they will be shortening the pile driving time. So they're not going to start until about 8:30 in the morning. And that originally they had the right to start at 7. So that's an hour and a half, which is helpful. And then they're going to stop earlier between 3:30 and 4 in the afternoon. They do think they'll be done by Friday, the 15th of May, very soon. And that's the worst of it. But they're also doing some talk with Amazon. These buildings are being built by Amazon as some things that they might do for the community to sort of help cope with it. Because even when the pile driving is done, there's going to be a lot of construction issues going on. And one of the things that we're doing new, which I don't know about you, Katie, I thought is probably a pretty good idea. We're going to try it, which is batching the cement on site. Instead of having truck after truck after truck with the turning cement driving miles from Loudoun County or somewhere, they're actually going to be doing the mixing right on the site and obviate the need for all of these trucks coming in and out. And of course, that's a lot of the noise and disruption of these huge trucks coming. So that's going to be interesting. I think that was a benefit. And then Katie, I don't know if you want to talk about the designing of the park, because that's another positive. They are working on that too. Yeah.
That's a great point too about the cement batching, although it's worth noting that's not happening in that park area. It's happening on another unused industrial style site right now. And I agree. I think that is going to be a benefit. That was part of this item I was happy to vote for, by reducing the number of concrete trucks rolling through the local streets there. But it is important to note that the temporary condition of the park is perhaps not one that will be welcomed. But in the end state is a brand new park, an expansion of Metropolitan Park, and a total redesign of it. Amazon has hired the design firm that did the High Line in New York, a much loved public open space reuse example. The engagement with the community about what the future park should contain and what it should look like had begun to kick off before the pandemic and the stay-home order hit, and it has now moved online. So we have that website up. There are examples and samples of pictures for some of the current thoughts based on that initial public engagement for folks to comment on, view, share their thoughts and feedback. So I believe the timeline that was shared by the applicant at the meeting last week was that the construction of this park would begin next year and be completed the year after. And so the end result of this is actually not just going to be a return to the current state of the park with part of it denuded of trees. It actually is going to be what we hope will be really a lovely centerpiece for this corner of the community to recreate and enjoy some fresh air and trees and the environment.
Yeah, well, fits in, I think, with the livability framework they've done. The livability framework that the community worked out, and it's really good. That community is very involved. So that's a positive. One of the positives, people are without people going to work and all the commuting, a lot of work is being able to be done in some ways faster, more efficient. But then there are people home all day suffering through all of the noise and disruption. So kind of pluses and minuses.
Right, of course, definitely understood. Just to wrap up, one thing we need to talk about and seem to get, overshadowed by the pandemic a bit was, of course, that we are in the midst of the 2020 census.
Right.
The county was due and still did do its kind of census day on April 1st, but that was, of course, the same day the stay-at-home order came into effect. Has that had any effect on folks filling out the census here in Arlington?
Well, the good news is that over 68%, I think it might be close to 65% of our households have been counted in Arlington, which is really encouraging. The point, of course, remains that we still have more than a third of our households to get counted. This year we had mounted our most aggressive effort ever to ensure a full count in Arlington. We had planned in-person gatherings, rallies to widely publicize the census and encourage people to be counted. We've been working with a pretty extraordinary complete count committee of a diverse group of residents from all over Arlington for over a year now at this point. We had invested these staff resources, this time, this money, convened this group of people because the census data is so important. As many people know, it determines how many seats we have in the House of Representatives and how federal funds are distributed in communities like Arlington. More than $675 billion in federal money every year is distributed on the basis of the census. And why I've been saying, while the pandemic has made a complete count harder, it's actually made it more important because that money is spent on things like public safety and hospitals, the very resources that are so necessary as we're seeing now. So while that number is encouraging, we absolutely need to get to 100% a complete count. And the Complete Count Committee has been doing all kinds of creative things, live chats. We had a Facebook chat on the census just earlier this week, heavy reliance on social media, more signage in more languages and strategies that are designed to reach communities that have been traditionally undercounted in Arlington. And the committee itself is engaging in all kinds of creative work. My favorite is the Complete Count Bingo, which includes different categories of underrepresented populations. And the Complete Count members and their partners are encouraged to call somebody from every one of those categories, whether it's a kid under 5, a senior in a congregate care living facility, or otherwise ensure that they're counted and they check off bingo along the way. The prizes are to be announced yet, but I'm sure there'll be competitive ones.
Yeah, and I want to compliment Katie because we're not on the in-person meeting, so you are always so good at feeding in the census. Like we're going along something, and all of a sudden, and the census. Oh, right. You've done a great job on that, and the census is obviously not the only thing that's been overshadowed by this pandemic. It's pretty much dominating everything right now, but it's so crucial we get the census done. I think the timeline has been extended also, hasn't it, Katie, to get it in?
That is a great question. I think the census is shifting the in-person outreach where they'd send census takers, obviously, and trying to do more of the over-the-phone outreach, and I think is allowing more time to do that. But we really encourage everybody to complete their census today if they haven't. If you go to census.gov, you can complete it online. If you've not received a mail invitation, there's a place there to request more information so that you can complete it online and not have to receive a phone call or not require a census taker to put themselves at risk to come to your door.
Yeah.
Is that outreach still planning to happen as we move through the summer if we still don't have those counts up?
So that is the actual work of the census taking is done by the federal government, the census itself. And so they've been keeping us apprised of how their plans are evolving. There will be, I know, some in-person census collection once it's safe to do so.
Okay, great. Well, we encourage everyone to get out there. Fill out your census forms. Online, phone, what have you.
I did mine on April 1st. Somehow I feel like I should do it that day. So
it's count day, so it's a perfect day.
And you got Carrie, right? You counted Carrie.
I did. My child under 5, one of the most undercounted groups. People think their kiddos don't count, but they certainly do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, and with that note, that's going to bring us to the end of this month's virtual edition of County Board Wrap Up. Libby and Katie, thank you both for joining us today virtually to walk us through some of the board's most important decisions in April. And of course, that will bring us to the end of this episode, one that has been reshaped by this COVID-19 pandemic, as so much of our lives have been. And of course, I want to take a moment to thank the board members for their leadership during this medical and economic crisis, as well as to thank those on the front lines of the pandemic. Our doctors, our nurses, medical professionals, the Virginia Hospital Center, our EMTs, firefighters, police officers, as well as folks like our grocery store workers, our delivery men and women, our teachers who are distance teaching our kids, our community, and everyone who is staying hunkered down to slow the spread of the virus. I'm Kara O'Donnell. We will be back one way or another next month with another edition of County Board Wrap. Until then, stay home, stay safe, wash your hands, wear that face mask when you're going out to public places, and have a plan in place in case you must self-quarantine. Thanks for joining us.